cannabis connects us with our humanity in ways that other things just don't. It allows us to be creative thinkers.
If only the United Nations smoked marijuana, right? Like, well, we could probably get some shit done, right? or maybe not.
Hey everybody, welcome to another EventSpeak episode with me, Big John, CEO of Beyond Experiential. Super excited about today's episode as we're doing something brand new here at EventSpeak. We're going to have ourselves a roundtable. Well, what's a roundtable, Big John? It's when we're going to get a group of people together and we're going to have an open discussion, in today's case, about the topic of cannabis. Cannabis and experiential, the cannabis industry, something that is no secret to anybody, has exponentially grown and changed from what it even was a few years ago. And we're excited today to have a really wonderful panel of industry leaders, thinkers, and friends joining us. Speaking of which, I'd like to take this moment to introduce our co-host. She is the host of Happy Hour here on the EventSpeak Network and the former High Times event director, Amanda Younger. Amanda,
hey,
what's up?
Thank you, Big John. Yes, I'm doing I'm doing well. I'm doing great. Yeah, and I was the former event director over at High Times back when we were doing the Cannabis Cups. I'd say 2015. So it was still a little bit of the Wild West, and they had just started to expand like the Cannabis Cups to different markets. And I was the poor soul going to new cities going like, please, can we bring a cannabis event? There's lots of business and vendors. And they're like, no, go away. And we're like, please.
We want to have a pot party in your parking lot. Can we do that?
Yeah. Can we put it in this field? Can we use that field for a parking lot? Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
I remember too well, as if you know, Amanda is also the executive producer at Beyond Experiential, my agency, as we are venturing further into the cannabis experiential world. So Amanda and I were in the trenches together on a lot of those as she brought us in to do some production support. So Amanda, I'm really stoked about today's episode, and I think we'll get it right underway and introduce our panel. We have Max Lenderman with us today. Max is the former founder of CCO of School, purpose-centric creative consulting that had experiential at its core. Max has also got his fingers deep into the cannabis industry and also now a new friend of ours that we're excited to welcome. Max, how you doing, brother?
I'm great. This is a great panel to be on. And side note, before I was an experiential marketer, the way I got into the business was I was a journalist and a trade journalist. And between gigs, I actually had the opportunity, I'm going to age myself, this must have been in 2008, where I edited Pot for Pennies Volume 2 at the High Times offices on Park Avenue South. So
Yes.
Amanda,
Awesome.
You and I have a connection right away. So great to be
That's
here.
awesome, man.
Can't wait.
And I want to just give a shout out to Max as well. Max was a guest on the show last month. Our dear friend Sam Ewan introduced us after Sam was on the show. And Max and I just hit it off. We started to talk. Clearly, we both had interest and our knowledge in the cannabis industry. We started to talk about having this roundtable idea. And Max really was integral in putting this together, Max. So we really appreciate all your support and help. Welcoming also John Lynch. John is the founder of TradeCraft Original, a cannabis consulting agency, and head of business development at Omura. Welcome, John. How are you today, brother?
I am happy to be here. Max, thank you for including me. And trust me, this is the highlight of my day today. So looking forward to it. And just on a couple of topics, Amanda, you brought up, I'm a 30-year beverage person with a lot of household names, and 3 years ago I was pulled into the cannabis industry. I started on 4/20/2018. I didn't know the significance of that. So obviously I had a lot to learn, but I've spent about 3 years now, and I have loved every moment of it, and looking forward to our discussion.
Just wait until you find out what July 10th is all about. 7/10.
That's our oil holiday.
You're like, why are there all of these numbers and things?
Does anyone else find it ironic that in an industry so related to cannabis that numbers play a role in it? I got into the industry first with years of extensive research of my own, is the way I would say it. And what were we talking about again? I'm kidding. Moving right along, Patrick Ray is the co-founder and managing director of CanopyBoulder, a seed-staged, mentorship-driven business accelerator for the cannabis industry. Patrick, thank you so much for taking time to join us today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. Nice to be here. Nice to be asked. I want to tip the hat to Max for including me, and I'm excited to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, brother. We're excited to have you. And last but certainly not least is Kate Lavin. Kate is the current editor at Marijuana Business Magazine. Kate, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much. Based on what John said, I actually joined the industry also in 2018 from the beverage industry. I was previously the managing editor at Wines and Vines magazine. So I spent about 10 years talking about wine, thinking about wine all day, and now I've moved over to cannabis.
And there's also cannabis wine, so I already see the pairing. I already see it.
Yeah, I've seen some interesting stuff from the crossover.
That's right.
That crossover is probably a whole other discussion for us guys, because it's just incredible what people have figured out you can infuse cannabis into these days. You know, I remember the days. I live in Los Angeles, and going, you know, like just right after Prop 215 was passed in 2001, and around 2005 when I moved here, and the fact that you could pay several $100s to get a rec and go into a pot shop that literally was a glass case with a guy in a bucket sitting behind it that had a sativa, had an indica, and had a hybrid. I was like, they have 3 different kinds, and I could buy it like a loaf of bread? I'm moving to LA, like, you know, that kind of thing. So, guys, you know, as we've talked about off camera and as we've spoken about individually, you know, we are going to keep this thing really loose today. We're having a conversation about this industry, cannabis industry, and we're just asking as we start to talk. We're going to go off some discussion questions, but you know what? Something else is going to come off of it. You know, other side conversations or whatever. So we're just going to let it flow and give all of the viewers at EventSpeak an opportunity to get a little peek into a world that I'm sure many are curious to know more about. So with that being said, Amanda, since I've been running my mouth the whole time, would you like to bring up the first topic of discussion that we'll be discussing today?
Oh, okay. Well, of course, we kind of want to start the conversation based off of kind of where we've been. Of course, we've talked about 2005 and 2015 and just kind of where we've all been in the cannabis industry as it's been growing in its legalization. So a good question is kind of, as we've seen, like the exponential amount of growth over the past 5+ years, in addition to state legalization, what factors are contributing to this growth, and how are cannabis businesses evolving to meet this demand?
I'll take a crack at that. So I forgot to mention, I joined the industry back in 2013 from the natural products industry, and you know, it plays into actually, I think, one of the answers to this question, which is a tight feedback loop. Mm-hmm. You know, when I was in the natural products industry, dietary supplements, organic foods, things like that, I used to joke that it was the world's largest faith-based industry. Mm-hmm. Because so many of the things that we would take and buy at Whole Foods or GNC or whatnot would be based upon a belief that they would reward us with benefits some point in the future. And you know, looking at the cannabis industry, we would see that there was a much tighter feedback loop. So consumption would result in experience, which would result in almost immediate feeling of wellness and would motivate a repeat purchase. So I feel like, unlike some other consumer product categories where there's more of a faith-based experience, a hope and a prayer that it will benefit you in the future, cannabis can actually help you right when you consume it. I think that is a driver that we can't not think about when we're talking about cannabis.
I mean, Patrick
Max.
just, it's like the Patrick's is the way of describing it is the perfect way of, or the perfect way of my answer, which is people are always looking for a new and better way to get fucked up. Right. And I think that there's and you can attribute the exponential growth to our existential desire for release and wellness that is totally predicated on the fact that the world is getting crazier, weirder, and harsher. And I think we're gravitating towards a plant, a holistic thing, almost preternaturally as humans, because all the other things like opioids and alcohol isn't doing the trick for a lot of us. And so, Patrick describes it perfectly as a feedback loop. I could more bluntly say we need the high. The society and culture needs the high, and there's people who are serving it up.
100%. In the light of everything going on in the world. John, Kate, any thoughts there?
I would actually say possibly the diversity that has come in recent years to the cannabis industry. John, you were saying the first time you walked into a dispensary, there were maybe 2 or 3 different strains. Now you go into a dispensary and there are 25 strains to choose from. There are concentrates, edibles, topicals, vapes, and all manner of consuming these things, whether you're using a pipe or a bong or rolling papers, and also all of the beverages, I guess. So I think no matter how you're interested in trying cannabis, there is something there for you. So people who maybe were afraid of smoking and using it that way, or, maybe in college tried an edible and got way too high and they don't want to do that. Now there's microdosing. And so I think the diversity in cannabis has really probably drawn a lot of people either back or first-time users.
Yeah, I think that's definitely how the industry has answered that immediate feedback. I completely agree.
John?
So one of the changes, trying to start a new company in the cannabis industry surrounded by little kids in your house. It's a little bit of a different scenario. I'm sorry. But the things I was trained on all my life that I'm seeing now, that excites me, it's new consumers every day, more new consumers every day, looking for help with pain, anxiety, relaxation, celebration. But it's a really wide base, and that we're not whispering about it. Kate, when you mentioned all the different forms, you didn't whisper or hold down. You can say it proudly, and it's become sort of dinner time conversation in a lot of households. But also all the new occasions that are coming out of it. It's not just, late night by yourself, listening to some old CDs or whatever it was back in college. But there's a lot of different occasions and different product forms. You just have so much choice and transparency in a lot of these products. That's exciting from a product person. That gets me pretty excited. And then you just start to see the differences market to market. That makes me think of the way craft beer sort of came on the market, where little nuances in the hops and the ingredients and the way it was grown and the story behind it. So that's just, it's overwhelming at times, but it's really exciting.
I think also,
100%.
With that added need, we're having, more counts of PTSD and anxiety, cancer, even just like those medical wellness outside of, our own enjoyment when we were younger and we got what we could in a dime bag. Now it's, I need something and this scares me, but hey, don't worry. There's like Kate said, there's that microdosing. We can have it in a little gummy bear. It's very easy and simple for you to chew on to get you that wellness and the relief that you're looking for. Yeah.
The medicinal aspects of it is something I think that the industry has always tried to use as its is arguing piece of where there's more to cannabis than essentially just taking care of your head, if you will. Yes, I mean to Kate's point, to what my original point was, is what once was just a very simple, here's 3 options. You walk now and you have unlimited options. You have happy hour. You have, you're getting money back on your purchases that can be used when you make purchases. There are grow houses on spot. How many states now have legalized it on a recreational level? Who would have thought that was even possible 10 years ago, 20 years ago for that matter. And now we see more and more the industry is saying, hey, listen, changing times in this country, changing times in looking for a new, the new next big thing that is going to revolutionize the way that we live. And cannabis, I believe, is doing that. You know, the taboo aspect of it is far, far less than it ever was. And, you know, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day. His mom has MS. Now, they are a very far-right leaning parents. Cannabis has always been a very, you know, like that might as well been like you're doing coke or heroin or something. And, you know, she was so doped up on pills and everything else that her quality of life was non-existent. She was so desperate that in light of everything that's been changing, and of course her son being openly a cannabis user, she approached him and said, I'll try anything, but I don't want to smoke anything. I don't want to inhale anything. And he, in short, got her on these gummies that now she's retained 60% more mobility. She's actually starting to walk. She's off all medication. And she said she absolutely, positively is just floored at what she has seen come from taking these THC-laden gummies. So, you know, I think that there's far more to it, guys. I think you'd all agree, than simply just those folks, as Max so eloquently said, that are just looking to get effed up. With that said, you know, I'm curious, and these are, like as I said, these are things I'm just thinking of off the top of my head. What do you guys see coming next as far as trends in cannabis? Okay, so obviously the pandemic is significantly impacted everything. Many businesses had to rethink themselves. Now, the cannabis industry, you know, has been deemed an essential business in 2020. We've seen not only has it survived it, it's been thriving through it. What are the trends that we think really supported that, and essentially have what we could see coming next going into 2021? How has the pandemic changed the business? How do you guys see that playing out?
So I'll take a whack at this, Big John, if that's okay.
Yes.
You know, and I'll start out with trying to pin down that very well put point that the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, has enabled cannabis to be seen in a new light. Obviously, being declared an essential business in most jurisdictions, most cities, states, was a lifesaver for the industry that could have gone a very different direction. As a result, though, with anxiety high and our lockdown situations where we have to confront our realities and we can't, you know, travel and be away, and you know, we saw cannabis sales accelerate in 2020 faster than was predicted. So one of our companies that we invested in back in and co-founded back in 2015 was a company called BDSA. And they are essentially the IRI or the Spin Stata or the Nielsen, whatever you want to call them, of the cannabis industry, where they collect scanner data from the dispensaries and then project and produce data that everyone can use to make better decisions about their businesses. At the beginning of the year, they predicted sales in the United States to total about $16 billion. So not an insignificant amount, you know, incredible growth. Started to look at different states, projecting, you know, like Colorado being more mature, growth starting to slow. In October, they did an analysis that indicated that 2020 sales would not be 16 billion, but they would be 18 billion. And states like Colorado were experiencing 20+% growth year over year. So I feel like this COVID-19 pandemic, as we, you know, in the many years ahead, we'll look back and look at this as just a force multiplier, an accelerant for the industry that enabled people to consume in their homes in a safe environment and not interact in an environment where they weren't feeling comfortable, and increase adoption beyond what they thought, like everyone thought was possible. So looking ahead, I think that it's really clear that legalization, the march towards legalization has accelerated, and it will happen sooner than we ever imagined. And for 2021, frankly, I'm looking for major movement on the federal level and in other major states, even in states, we're hearing rumblings in Texas. And just think about that population being added to the legal market in the United States and what that will do for acceptance and adoption and potential for the cannabis industry to grow even more.
In a way, the pandemic has helped shift the perception even further with cannabis.
Absolutely. It's forced us to confront our anxieties and our realities where there's stresses, and not just avoid them through, I'm going to go for a run, or I'm going to go to the store, I'm going to travel, or whatever. You have to confront it, and everybody needs help.
100%. Max.
I also think the UX, right, the user experience or the customer experience has definitely shifted from pre-COVID of a lot more store browsing, obviously, or in store kind of engagement, one-on-one bud tender engagement, if you can call it that, or point of sale engagement, where there's an opportunity to learn, to kind of share information. I think now it's gone a little bit more, or a lot more, into the pre-order realm, where you're doing your own, uncurated searching and your own kind of, just the way that you would shop for another pair of pants, for instance. You do your price comparison, you do your shopping, and you do the pre-order. So I think the user experience, again, has provided a sense of safety as well, right? You're doing it at your pace, at your leisure, with your research tools. You don't feel like you're intimidated, talking to a connoisseur, and you have to remember that the sky's still the limit. The majority of the growth is still with what you would call mature users, right? Like people who've had past experiences, right? Whether in college or since college, or are still kind of habitual users. There's a whole strata of people, hundreds of millions of people that haven't even begun to experience that user experience of going in and buying cannabis. And I think COVID has accelerated a new pathway to new ways of thinking about that user experience.
Absolutely.
Max brings up a really good point, I think. It's changed so much, because one of a lot of the research we did a year or two ago, when I was with a larger company, had more resources to go do this, was the barriers of entry to the category. And once you make that decision that, yes, cannabis can help me, to what Patrick said, in any of these areas, you still need to make a big leap to go into the dispensary for the first time. It's not a great experience for the most part. Now, it's evolved a lot, and there's some great experiences now, but still, it's pretty intimidating. But now it is so easy. And I live in Florida, a medical state. You can have a telemedicine meeting with your doctor, never have to go to one of these offices, get your first purchase ever without ever having to go into a dispensary, research in the privacy of your own home with nobody in your friends or family really knowing what you're exploring. And then there's also these other great companies out there now that can help educate you in a pretty sort of agnostic to the brand way to make it a safer, easier experience and a little bit more predictable, which I think all leads toward a path of normalcy.
Yeah, and with that digital experience, it's much easier to add another product to cart and be prompted to add an incremental product to your cart, so your basket size grows, right? Yes. So it's this new experience, opening up the world to more consumers, making it easier, just as you described. They don't want to park in the dispensary. They don't know what to do going inside. What if somebody sees them? But they can add to cart and then over time try more products. This is in a very experiential category, right? I think we'd all agree that cannabis is incredibly experiential. And people like to have new experiences, especially when they're at home in lockdown. So it's like this confluence of events, right, that we're seeing that COVID's driving. And it's super exciting, honestly, I think for everyone involved in the industry to see this big leap.
And I'm looking at just to jump one last leg of this table is the tax revenue that comes from it, right? That what COVID has also done is it's pilfered a lot of coffers for states that perhaps may not have been thinking about legalization, and now we're kind of looking around and looking at Colorado, who's hitting $1 billion every year since 2018 in funds for education. Right, it becomes a really compelling argument to say, hey, let's get this going in our state as well. And so to say that the surface hasn't been scratched yet is still an understatement, which is crazy, 10, 12 years into this industry, and you could still say the surface hasn't really been scratched. It's phenomenal and really cool.
Kate.
Yeah, everyone's made such good points. I'm really impressed, but I wanted to chime in and mention, as far as the pandemic affecting the industry, some states that previously didn't have pickup, you couldn't order online and then show up and get what you ordered. They didn't maybe allow delivery. Now they've opened up both of those channels. So there are a lot of people out there who just hate shopping. They hate going into a store. They don't want to talk to a bud tender. And then on top of that, think about the pandemic. Then you're talking to someone face to face. I think retailers are really doing the best that they can under the situation with protecting their employees and protecting the customers. But you're still going into a store. So when you offer the possibility of curbside pickup or delivery that makes it safer, then you also gain all those people who don't want to go into a retail store and give them more options
100%.
To experience.
They can keep that, not only the anonymity, they can also feel safe. Speaking just from the experience here in Los Angeles, despite the pandemic, you go to any given clinic and you got people spaced out 6 feet apart with a line going out the door, waiting to get into these places because they're running happy hour, they're doing whatever they're doing. I think, guys, that this is something that really ties into what we're discussing is that, let's face it, our country and our economy is going to be reverberating from the effects of this pandemic for the next foreseeable future, maybe the next decade plus, okay? And do you feel that that's really going to excel from a federal perspective, of looking for a push for a national legalization? And on a caveat to that, discussion that Max and I were having individually, and he brought up a good point, so I want to volley this to you first, Max, is there going to then from that see a Pepsi or a Coke come in the cannabis industry? Why haven't we seen that yet? It's not like this is a new business. Where does that all sit? Max, what do you say?
I thought about it, and I had I don't know if it's an answer or not, but I thought maybe I was looking at it a little bit wrong. And what I'm looking at is who is standing in the way of having a Coke and Pepsi in the cannabis business, right? What are the entrenched interests that are out there? You're thinking about, the alcohol industry, right? And the distributors, that the multi-billion-dollar distribution system because of the 3-tier system that would say, we're going to do everything we can against national legalization. You're looking at state by state. Some investor groups have spent, I think, John, when you and I were talking about, there, millions of dollars of licenses that they might not want to, and hold a small monopoly for a state, might not open up to a national, federal kind of thing. So there's some entrenched interest, I think, that don't want to see this, right? They don't want to see. I'm sure the liquor and to a certain extent the tobacco industry is looking at this with trepidation. So I think it's the regulatory system and the fact that we started this conversation saying the choices are so limitless, it's hard to find a clear-cut winner. And because the experience of that closed loop that Patrick said, or the short loop that Patrick talked about, is individual to everyone. It can't be replicated like the way a can of Coke or a can of Pepsi has that same replicable user experience, or like a Johnny Walker Black, right? You know what you get. Maybe it's those factors, but I really do think that there's probably some big infrastructural players that are saying, "Oh, this is a big threat to our business, and we're gonna stand in the way."
Patrick, what say you?
Well, it's interesting. Just 4 days ago, Molson Coors announced their first launch of their first CBD-infused sparkling beverage into the United States market in Colorado through a couple partnerships. Pabst Blue Ribbon is licensed.
Pabst, right?
Licensed. It's not clear exactly how this license worked to a THC business in California. So we're starting to see some movement around the edges. Not a direct attack, right? And I think the simple reason for that is the federal laws. These businesses are still federally illegal, and in many, if not all, of the operating agreements of these companies, these large tobacco, pharma, alcohol, they have provisions in those agreements that disallow them from participating in any federally illegal activity as a protection of their shareholders. So there's changes that, and these are not minor decisions, these are big changes that need to be made on a corporate governance level. So, where we're seeing activity is not in the United States. Absolutely. We're seeing it around the edges, CBD and weird licensing. We're seeing engagement where, in whatever countries the markets are open. So more recently, that's been Canada, where there is federal legalization, and elsewhere. We see activity on the, in the public. But I'll tell you this, virtually every one of those companies that we think of when we think of the alcohol, tobacco, pharma, they have people on this market. They are looking, they are investigating, they are monitoring, they're formulating, they're communicating and strategizing for the time when they can leap in. So it's good to know. I shouldn't stop anybody from getting into the business, because we've still got immense opportunity to become, if you're an entrepreneur or an investor, to become into the industry and establish your territory, and be a big roadblock for one of them to come in, that they need to come to your door and hopefully buy out or buy in to what you're doing to enter the market.
Hey, Big John here.
John.
Can I, in the spirit of Tampa Bay making it to the conference championship, I want to split the uprights here. And I went from an absolute ultimate Brady hater to he's the greatest guy in the world now. But it's also, if you're not in this industry, this is a summary of a number of people try to explain it. I think this is a good snapshot. Max is definitely right. Patrick, yes. But this industry is it's hard. All right. I mean, this is an agricultural product that has a lot of variability. And the analogy I think it makes a lot of sense is when craft beer came out, early 90s, when Sam Adams launched, they were responding to a demand in the marketplace. People wanted flavor, a different profile. They wanted something other than Bud Miller. But when they did that, there was this big machine to plug the brand into. There was an established distribution system, interstate commerce, retailers. It was just expanding a category. I mean, I have the pleasure of working with a lot of different companies and brands at different parts of the value chain. In every state, it's a little bit different. There's challenges. It's just, there's no easy way to do something at scale. This is extremely expensive, or you're licensing your IP to somebody and trusting them to deliver on a consistent experience. So it's just I love it, but it's a street fight every day, and everything is hard.
I would add to that. I would add to that also in terms of, and from the craft beer perspective, but also from the craft wine and small vintner perspective, right? And because there is no advertising infrastructure to plug into either, and those craft brewers didn't have the marketing budgets, the idea of one-on-one engagement, right? Doing your beer show, having a tasting room that is totally inviting people into participating with the brand to create authenticity and transparency, et cetera, and a great founder story. All these things are very applicable to a certain extent to growing a cannabis brand, except there's all these roadblocks to every single time you're trying to do something of that nature. So you're almost beholden to creating. It's very hard to create experiential at scale, but really that's going to be the breakthrough, is how do you get out of small curated micro markets and becoming the type of player or the type of approach or the type of product mix that allows you to be much more scalable. And I think everyone's trying to get to that place.
I would add, kind of piggybacking on what Patrick said about the federal illegality, I think until we have a whole lot more states that make cannabis legal and possibly even allow some kind of interstate commerce, we're really not going to see a Coke or a Pepsi, because the way it is state by state, you have to reinvent the wheel every single time. You have to have a cultivation site in every single state and a processing site and a retail outlet. It's not like, California, for example, grows great cannabis, and so they can send it over to Nevada. Even though Nevada has a legal market, they have to grow their own and have their whole infrastructure, come up with a brand new marketing plan for each location. And that's just a really expensive barrier. So even though there are some really large companies that are well funded and have great management in the cannabis space, it might not make sense for them to join one of the new markets like Mississippi or Montana or South Dakota, because how many people are really going to be buying their product? They could just keep funneling more money into California, and they've got a ready-made market of 55 million people compared to, in some of those states, less than 1 million people.
I was just going to ask a follow-up, because it sounds like a lot of good pain points that a lot of the cannabis brands are currently experiencing. I just wanted to ask an additional question. If there were other pain points that you've been hearing that brands are kind of looking to solve, maybe in their marketing. You were talking about, maybe not looking at other demographics or certain regions of the country. What do you think is really kind of getting in the way?
I think finding capital for some of these smaller companies is a really huge issue. There are, angel investors and people who are looking to put money into these businesses. But it does kind of seem like a lot of the same businesses are attracting the money over and over. And then there might be, an entrepreneur in a state that's just getting going, and they have to look to family and friends and try and get money to start up that way. And there are social equity programs in a lot of states that are looking to change that and give people the mentorship and the startup capital to get things moving. But until there is a big change, I think we are going to see some Coke and Pepsi equivalents taking over some of the more intriguing markets.
That makes sense. Patrick.
So, Kate, those are great points. I think you're absolutely right. The capital constraints on the industry are severe. However, and it presents a headwind along with the federal legalities and all that. The ability to interstate commerce, everything that we talked about, these are headwinds for the market. But then consider we upped our estimates from 16 to 18 billion in total market sales this year. You talk about like a tailwind that is just, it won't be stopped, right? So what's happening, though, is to build on what your earlier point about, the evolution of the market. I think that, once we start seeing, and we're starting to see now, companies, multi-state operators, the companies that are often the most well-capitalized, they have the most licenses in the most states, they start reporting, because they're publicly traded, $100 million revenue quarters and line of sight to $1 billion. People start waking up in those corporate offices, right? And then what do? They start asking why they're not in this business. Who's in charge? Who's watching this, right? And that person or persons start getting elevated to the point where the conversations then become, what do we need to do to get in this? This is obviously eating at our beer sales or our alcohol sales or our tobacco sales, or where's our ambient sales are down. Like, is this what's happening? And if the answer is yes, and I would argue that it is, then the government affairs departments engage and the corporate boards begin to engage. And it's no longer, something far away that's happening. It's right here, right now. And at that point, the government affairs divisions of these corporations start talking to their lobbyists, who start talking to the staffers, and when they have a long history of donations and contributions, those senators and those congressmen and women, they start listening. And we've said this before, it's only so long that our representatives in DC can ignore the will of the voters who are voting to legalize in the states. So I would argue that it's going to come soon. And, you know, like your point, how many states have we legalized? I would say it's like a half-life. You know, the march towards legalization is like a half-life. We get here, we get closer and closer to it until we're right up against it. And that environment is a perfect time for a senator or a congressman or woman to change their tune and start patting themselves on the back and usher in legalization, right? If we think it happens another way, we should rethink that, because so we should support these big companies. We should bring in more talent. Every stock purchase, your grandpa, your uncle, your sister, your brother buying a share of, I don't know, Cresco or Green Thumb Industries, like, support it. It helps us move towards legalization, which is what we really need to take this industry now to the next level, because we're really close.
Because the legalization is going to completely revolutionize how we're able to market cannabis, how it's able to be advertised. From the experiential standpoint, what we're able to do from state to state, city to city, and how people experience cannabis. And I think you guys would agree that education and getting people to get that other generation that are a huge voting base that are vehemently against this. People like, you know, someone like my 78-year-old aunt that looks at cannabis like it's cocaine, or that it is just appalled by it. I really think that for every person out there that is an active cannabis user, medicinal or recreational, we also need to focus on those folks and sort of educating them. And mind you, I don't think we're going to be able to teach an old dog new tricks when it's something that they grew up their whole lives believing to be evil. But the question I have is, how do we do that? Because kind of playing, devil's advocate here, you've got people that are going to be like, no, hold on. All this may be true, and money. There's other options. You've got people that use cannabis as a gateway drug. You're going to end up trying cocaine. You're going to end up trying this. You're going to end up trying that. And there's a lot of arguable points there. So what do you guys think from that perspective against the naysayers, against the gateway druggers, so to speak?
I think the introduction of CBD and hemp-based CBD has gone a long way to converting some of the naysayers, like you were talking about, or, you know, people who might have underlying health conditions, but have heard about the benefits of cannabis. Hemp-based CBD is just, it's still from cannabis, it's just low THC cannabis. And so if people are scared, I don't know if this is a good idea, I don't want to take it, but then they find out, okay, this is not going to get you high, you're not going to feel any different, and then they try it and maybe see some positive health benefits without the unwanted side effects, then I think that's a great way to approach it. Unfortunately, the CBD business has been hit really hard by economic factors during the past year. I think something that could really help in that way is some really strong brands coming to the forefront that have effects that you know what they're going to be. They're really standardized. Their manufacturing is on point. And so people get some brand loyalty.
Absolutely.
I think I've got one more kind of question, and I think just because everyone's coming from a different perspective of the cannabis industry, I wondered, take federal legislation aside, even though this is the biggest part. Let's say, yay, federal legislation happens with the new administration, maybe not immediately, but maybe in the next 4 years. Let's just put a hypothetical. What are each of you kind of hoping to see in the industry, where it could go that it's currently been, unable to go? Where's the potential you really see it could really be?
One thing that I think will help that tremendous, it's pretty obvious, but I'll say it anyways, but it's just accessibility. It's still hard, even for a variety of reasons that we've all talked about, But then once that happens, for more people to start talking about having normal experiences, where it's not just this outlier edible experience that was horrible. Where now there's better experiences now. It's better products. They're a little bit more consistent. So I think there's that part of it, but just where it becomes part of the normal opportunity, because I do think the crossover with alcohol and spirits, it's the same mission. I'm going to address a couple need states, and if this was an option I had all the time, it's going to just become part of the fabric. And my wife and I have joked about it. I think in 5 or 6 years, I have 2 little kids. I'll be talking about my life just like I was in a beer, wine, spirit, like it's just another quality, safe, common experience. So real grand reveal there, accessibility, but that's going to play a role.
It's a big one.
I think that's something really substantial you just said, John, because we're all looking at this from our perspectives in the varying age group, and I'm fairly sure we're all close to around the same age as how we see it. And we've seen this fundamental shift. The generation that's coming up now, even post millennials, it's going to be a completely different experience for them. And this is not going to, they're not going to know that sort of tabooness that has always existed around cannabis or hemp for that matter. Kate, you mentioned hemp earlier, and that's maybe something that could be an interesting side car for the push to federal legalization, because there's the hemp industry. There's all of these products. There's so much that can come from hemp, and yet overall that's been illegal. So do we see this isn't just as simple as the push for the legalization of cannabis from concentrates, flour, and infused beverages and edibles. There's this whole other capacity of it, which I think from so many perspectives, and me being an experiential guy, is very exciting, because that's every single one of those products has the potential to need brand awareness, to need the experiential arm of various agencies and people to come along and introduce people to it. I think experiential could play a very key role in all of that. Now, as we've been talking about past, we've been talking about present. What do you see in 5 to 10 years? What do you see when it's been federally regulated, it's now legal, we've got perhaps, it's accessible, there's these obstacles are gone. Now, of course, with that is going to come new obstacles and the next hurdles to jump. What are those going to be? Maybe that's a more accurate question to ask.
Gotcha. It's like I think about this stuff all the time. So I think that we as an industry need to move towards predictability, reliability, and safety. These are things that we know consumers can grab onto and stay with for a long time. And, that is a filter I would encourage everyone entering the industry or looking at the industry to use when assessing opportunities to join a team, invest in a team, partner with a team. Brand is critical. And Max and I've talked about this, but underneath that brand, there has to be an authentic, disruptive force that drives forward the business. And in the market today, there are great products and people have great experiences. But I would argue that the predictability, reliability of those needs work. And frankly, just because the traditional food science hasn't really been brought into the mix enough to get there. It can be done, and there's gates that will open to bring that tech in, and it's going to happen. It's happening now in some sectors, but not broadly. Because if we want to win over the 57-year-old female in Michigan, she needs to know what she's getting, and she knows that it's safe, and she has some idea of how she's going to feel after she consumes it. I think that's a big thing. But before we move on to the next point, we talked about the change in demographics, and this is a really powerful thing that I want to bring up. Gallup, for years, since the 70s, they've been asking consumers in their national polls, do you think the use of marijuana should be made legal or not? Just 20 years ago, 34% of Americans said yes. Today, that's 68%. It's doubled. And so looking into the future, are we going to, we can't double again. Right? We're over 100%. So we know that's not going to happen, right? But we're getting closer and closer to cannabis just through, aging demographics and people moving out of the sample, that we're getting to a point where this isn't a question of should we or not. It's like, how do we do that? And I think it's going to take all stakeholders and everybody on board to make this a safer, more reliable experience for consumers, a place where people can join, lock on, and stay.
Do you think a lot of that is going to be on like the packaging, packaging regulations across numerous brands, just so that there's this unifying, requirements for the consumer to see on the packaging?
Yeah, I think
I think right now it's only like state by state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, different states have different rules, especially for packaging and labeling. But when the federal government gets involved and the FDA gets involved, and it will get involved. Like, I think we need to just accept that. They have a clear mandate for consumer protection, and they're going to move slow. They're going to be very diligent, and they're going to want to make sure everything's safe. So what we're seeing happening in CBD and hemp, which was brought up just a little bit earlier, I think is a great category to follow to see what federal legalization for hot cannabis products, THC products, could potentially look like. And there's a lot to learn there. So it's a great case study and sort of like a preview of what will come in the future.
Patrick, you hit on something that I think is, all of it's been interesting, but curious about this. You mentioned you came from natural foods. So I did natural foods and I did craft beer. And during that period, there was a sense of community. I felt like it was the industry working together to solve these big problems, the non-GMO project, things like that, or some of the top brewers back at the American Beer Festival kicking around, talking about recipes open in front of everybody. My sense, though, I'm only 3 years into this, that it's nowhere near as collaborative in this industry. Not necessarily in a bad way, but it's a lot of individual organizations, all in a big part of the bigger movement, but I just don't see a lot of cross-company, multi-state collaboration to go tackle some of these big systemic challenges. Am I missing that, or is that a fair assessment?
Well, no, I think it's a fair assessment, and I think there's a pretty simple answer for that we also saw in the natural products industry at a point in its early evolution, and it's really simple. It's just that it's a bunch of feral cats and dogs, that have a hard time coming together in a pack to get something done. And I don't know how many of the old OGs of the natural and organic foods industry that I stay in touch with, and they keep saying, well, it feels like a natural 1981. And I'm like, well, I don't know what that was like, because that was before my time. I was 5 years old. But tell me about it. And he's like, man, people just were, they thought they deserved something. They were entitled to be on the podium and finish the race when it hadn't even begun. And so I think it's a perspective that just over time, people they see the opportunity in the early stages, and they're going to get kicked in the teeth, and that those lessons bring humility, and then a sense that I can't do this myself. I need Max, and I need Kate, and I need Big John, Amanda, and you, John. We need to work together, and it's part of the evolution. It's part of the process that a lot of people they haven't experienced it before, so they just don't know.
Thank you, Patrick.
100%, Patrick. I think that's a really good point to talk about, and I think we can all agree on is now more than ever, the pandemic considered, as we're now moving past it, as bad as things have gotten we are taking every step closer to getting on the other side of it. And as the cannabis industry had a really, really big year this last year, we do need to be more united than ever before, and thinking outside the box of how we get from where we are now to where we want to end up. So what I wanted to do here is we're getting towards the end of our show here is give each of you an opportunity, and not a lightning round, but just to give us any final thoughts of the topic in general, anything you'd like to volley to somebody else to ask them, and also let us know where we can find you and online, whether you have a website, anything that you want to mention. We want the EventSpeak audience to know who you guys are, and if they want to know more about you and what you guys do, where they can find you. Max on the attack. Come on, man.
I'll go first. So as a parting thought, in line with what you were just saying, Big John, in terms of like kind of a shitty year, maybe another 6-9 months of shittiness. Can you bleep out shittiness? I don't know. This will be in post, but
don't worry about it, man. We've heard worse.
Okay,
on the show.
Cool. All right, fine. Thinking like 10 years ahead, what gives me optimism when you asked that question, Amanda, and what gave me optimism was, a world that has mass access to cannabis products, whether it's CBD or THC, and what kind of a better society could be. Like, I'm reminded of, like, I don't know if it's Peter Tosh or Burning Spear. It's like, it's the healing of the nations, right? Like, if only the United Nations smoked marijuana, right? Like, well, we could probably get some shit done, right? Or maybe not. But the optimism of mental health, of physical health, of cultural health, of societal health, of environmental health, of social justice health. There's a lot of stuff that's tied into this plant, and a lot of intentionality that's tied into this plant. And my optimism from 10 years from now is that it actually starts to affect society, let alone, business or bottom line. It actually has an impact on how we live as human beings, and I hope it's in the positive. I really do. Oh, and
Absolutely,
you can find me at, I don't know where you can find me. You can find me on the street, busting for quarters.
You can find Max on EventSpeak. That's definitely where you can find him.
That's right.
Going in my line of sight to his right and my point of view. John Lynch, tell us the same.
You brought up before, once again, Patrick, sorry to keep playing off of you, but I haven't been knocked down yet, but I've been hit pretty hard in this industry, and that I've chosen to stay in it. I'm committed to it. It's rewarding. It's fun. And I love this part of the work. And the brands that are out there, they need help. They may not know it yet, but there are aspects of this work that they need people to help. And that's kind of what we're here to go do. And, we have a simple thing. We want to work with well-intended brands that exactly what you said, Patrick, predictable, reliable, and safe. And I only want to work with good people. I'm never going to work with assholes again. So those are my two things, and we're here to help. So we have a great little portfolio of brands. We're trying to make an impact on the industry. I can be found, probably the best place would be just LinkedIn, John Lynch, not the football player, the cannabis guy. TradeCraft origin.
That's awesome. Kate, how about you?
I guess for a last thing to bring up, I would like to say, we look at alcohol in the cannabis industry as something that has arrived, but there are still problems such as interstate shipping, and I think that it would be great, going forward as we look toward legalization, to see some of the pain points that the alcohol industry has and think about how we could fix them, how we could make things better. For cannabis in the future. And if you want to find me, go to mjbizdaily.com and click on the magazine tab, and you'll find Marijuana Business Magazine.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. Patrick.
Well, if anyone wants to reach out to me, you can. I'm a pretty active user on LinkedIn. Probably the best way to get my attention is to connect and send me a note on LinkedIn. So, when I started into this industry back in 2013, it was very different. And it's amazing to see what change has happened in just that short period of time. We made over 130 investments in 115 companies in this industry. We've seen a lot and got to experience a lot. And I'm very grateful for that. Business can be a great agent of social change. especially when we feel that, and I think a lot of us do, that at times our leaders let us down. And what's great about cannabis, the cannabis business being a driver and agent of social change, is that cannabis connects us with our humanity in ways that other things just don't. It opens us up, it allows us to be creative thinkers, and for many of us, it allows us to be more productive. So, we've had so many decades of stigma and, people telling us it makes us dumb and is not part of normal society. I think, what I'm excited about is that's changing. And like I said before, every stock that your aunt buys or news story that my grandmother forwards me or whatever, these are all movements towards normalization, and we need to encourage them. And this is a big tent. We need to welcome people in and make sure they understand these foundational elements, changing the world, which we are doing. And I'm just excited for you guys to be part of this and to work on it together. And thanks, Big John, for the opportunity to join this event.
Bravo, Patrick. Well said. And it's our pleasure. Amanda, closing thoughts and where we could find you. I think we know, but tell us.
Oh, well, you can always find me at amanda@eventspeak.com, your host over at Happy Hour with Amanda Younger. I'm always really hoping for decriminalization when it comes to cannabis and those that have been locked up. And also the fact that cannabis has kind of been used as a way to throw, our brothers and sisters behind jail, or at least get them documented somehow. And I'd like to take that tool away for sure. And I'd also like more hemp textiles because most of them are really expensive, and I'd like them to be a little bit cheaper because they breathe and they look nice on me. Anywho. Those are my parting thoughts.
Those are your parting thoughts. Guys, I will tell you, first and foremost, I just want to give a sincere thanks to each and every one of you for taking time today to come on the show and talk with us. Amanda, I probably wouldn't even be sitting here right now doing this if it had not been for you. Amanda, when she was at High Times, had hired Beyond Experiential, my agency that Amanda's now an executive producer at in our cannabis initiatives, and brought me into the trenches in what was 5 years ago, but might as well been 50 years ago as far as how things have advanced. And be sure to check out her show. And I tell each of our guests today, if you feel like talking more about the business and doing it over a cocktail with a lot of laughs, you should definitely go on Amanda's show because she's got a really great show, and it's always enjoyable to see what she's up to each week. For me, I will say that I feel hopeful, and I feel that what we've seen in growth in such a short period of time, and what will be one of the silver linings of the pandemic. I have trepidation even to say that because of so much tragedy and so much death and so much that has been entrenched because of this global atrocity that has happened to us. We have the options to unite and build back stronger and better, which is what we have to do, or keep our blinders on to thinking that what we were doing before can somehow go back to that and it's going to make everything okay. And that goes into rethinking the cannabis industry, and for us to unite together to push for federal legalization, which is going to create jobs, it's going to create tax revenue, it's going to better our society. It's going to create value for every single person involved, including from the medicinal aspects of it into the recreational aspects of it. And as Patrick said so eloquently, this really helps us all be better. If you were to take a bottle of whiskey and say, do too much of this, and take a bag of pot and say, do too much of this, where do you think is going to work out better? To the effects it has on your body, and the whiskey in one, as much as I love whiskey, Amanda, no offense, to maybe on the other side of it with the bag of pot, yet another trip to the Taco Bell drive-thru. There are worse things, I think, that could come from it. But listen, I just want to, again, thank everybody for coming on. EventSpeak is about this. That is what we started this for. Honestly, guys, it was something where we all came together with the intention of giving people in the industry a place to have dialogue and solidarity. And it's grown and grown and grown, and it's an opportunity now as one of our first episodes of the year to say thank you to all of the viewers and people that are making it possible for this to continue. To our production team and Chris and JT and James and Fox and all the people that make this possible. Your work and your effort is incredibly appreciated by me, Amanda, and everybody else. You can find us, of course, guys, at eventspeak.com. I'm still Big John, and this is still EventSpeak with Big John. Signing off for today, but we will see you all very soon, and it's me reminding you guys to take care of yourselves and each other.